In April 1964, with the spring sun beating down on them, 3 battalions of Viet-Cong were marching through Trong Chien province. Their objective was the civil guard post in the town of Kien Long. This is the story of how the Viet-Cong could mass and maneuver a full regiment in daylight, overrun a government outpost, and hold it for 1 week against government counterattacks. This channel's mission is to challenge the Vietnam orthodoxy through reference to primary sources. Much of what you know about the Vietnam War is either incomplete or false. Please consider supporting this channel and its mission through Patreon. The link is in the description. When President Ngo Dinh Diem was murdered in the November 1963 coup, Ho Chi Minh, leader of North Vietnam, remarked, "I can scarcely believe the Americans would be so stupid." One of the principal actors in the coup, Avril Harriman, the State Department official responsible for South Vietnam, later observed in an interview that Diem was better than the chaotic condition which followed him. The North Vietnamese Politburo understood the enormity of this strategic mistake and were determined to capitalize on it. Diem was one of the strongest individuals resisting communism. The lackey administration cannot be stabilized. The coup d'etat on November 1st, 1963 will not be the last. At its 9th conference, the Central Committee observed that the weakening of the government in South Vietnam and the disruption of army and administrative agencies across the country had created favourable conditions for the destruction of the strategic hamlets. A 12-man military revolutionary council, headed by General Minh, governed South Vietnam after overthrowing President Diem. Prime Minister Nguyen Ngoc To was in nominal control of the country, but he was frequently overruled by military veto. The generals replaced nearly all of the district and provincial chiefs responsible for running the strategic hamlet program, the militias, the police, and the economic and political programs in the villages. They also dissolved the Republican Youth, the Popular Forces, and the Strategic Hamlet Coordinating Committee, organisations that were most responsible for making the Strategic Hamlet program a success. And during November and December, many strategic hamlet militia units were disarmed due to doubts about their loyalty to the new regime. The leadership of both the Civil Guard and Self-Defense Corps was also wrecked. The Viet-Cong launched a series of attacks after the coup, quickly realising that it could now move through the countryside and launch attacks without incurring substantial losses. Without clear instructions from the new government in Saigon, the provincial chiefs, often inexperienced, did little to combat the Viet-Cong, and this lack of leadership and drive caused inertia to take hold at the district, village and hamlet levels. The aggressive urban patrols, which had been so effective in weakening the Viet-Cong and preventing them from massing, had stopped, and without support from mobile reaction forces, the militiamen in many areas turned in their weapons and stopped fighting. As this situation developed, government outposts and strategic hamlets were overwhelmed as Viet-Cong activity intensified. In December, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara and CIA Director John McCone returned from a visit to South Vietnam. McNamara believed that unless current trends were reversed, within 2 to 3 months the country would be neutral at best or under communist control. McCone's view was equally bleak. There is no organised government in South Vietnam at this time. Later, in March 1965, an assessment made by the Communists described the collapse of South Vietnam. The balance of forces has changed very rapidly in our favour. The bulk of the enemy's armed forces and paramilitary forces at the village and hamlet level have disintegrated, and what is left continues to disintegrate. 80% of the strategic hamlets have been destroyed, and most of the people and land in the rural countryside are in our liberated zones. The North Vietnamese Navy also began moving material in steel-hulled ships to secret docks on the South Vietnamese coast or to Cambodia. During 1964, 3,600 tons of weapons were delivered to the Viet-Cong, an almost threefold increase in the total delivered in the preceding 2 years. Many units were then equipped with AK-47 assault rifles, machine guns, RPGs, and heavy weapons such as recoilless rifles and mortars, made in the Soviet Union, China, or Eastern Europe. General Nguyen Hanh had participated in the November coup, but later became disenchanted. He was not given a top position in the new government, and he was moved from 2 Corps in the Central Highlands to command 1st Corps based around Hue and Danang. Hanh then talked to the senior US advisor in 1st Corps, Colonel Jasper Wilson, and suggested that another coup was imminent, led by pro-French generals who planned to neutralise South Vietnam, a plan he could preempt by seizing control of the government himself. When informed of the plan, General Hawkins, head of MACV, and Ambassador Lodge chose not to block it. At 4 am, January 30th, 1964, paratroopers, tanks and armoured cars surrounded the homes of the top civilian and military leaders and arrested them. By dawn, Hanh had taken control of the government, quickly making himself Prime Minister. One particular act of retribution was swift. Nguyen Van Yong, who had murdered Diem and his brother Nhu in November, was himself executed behind a Saigon villa in a similar fashion. His predecessor, General Minh, had been somewhat disinterested in running the country, and while Hanh was more capable and decisive, he shared much of Minh's weaknesses as a national leader. A CIA report in October 1964 remarked that Hanh has shown signs of being overwhelmed by his responsibilities. He replaced many provincial and district chiefs with more capable officials that had previously been removed by the Minh regime, but when charged by militant Buddhists of reverting to Ziemist persecution of Buddhists, he returned to arresting those who had been loyal to Diem. And concerned that a further coup might replace him, he filled positions on the basis of personal loyalty rather than merit. Hanh moved to strengthen his position in Saigon and withdrew troops from 4 Corps in the Mekong Delta, placing them in a defensive ring around the capital. The Viet-Cong exploited the weakening of 4 Corps, and on April 12, 3 battalions attacked the Civil Guard post at Kien Long in Chongqing Province, 135 miles south of Saigon. After overrunning the district, the VC executed the district chief and his family. The American 121st Assault Helicopter Company then lifted an ARVN force to counterattack the Viet-Cong, supported by gunships of the US 120th Helicopter Company. The battle continued for several days until the ARVN could finally enter the town as the VC withdrew. Losses were heavy on both sides. On the government side, 70 civil guardsmen and 55 ARVN soldiers were killed, while 175 VC were killed. But the Viet-Cong had manoeuvred 3 battalions in daylight, had held their ground against the ARVN with US support for 8 days, and had withdrawn in good order.